Royal Highness Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, a man who in the old days in the United States often introduced himself to complete strangers as the Duke of York, not realizing that Americans are not going to know who the Duke of York is, or a duke. What is a duke? Is that like a dog's name or something? Anyway, they'd obviously pronounce it Duke. So Prince Andrew, now how old is he now? 62? Yeah, 62 this year. And he really is delusional because it has come to light that he still believes it's possible to rehabilitate his reputation. So Prince Andrew, I'll give you a bit of the backstory. So he's the Queen's second son and third child. Rumor has it her favorite offspring. Hello there, Audrey. And He went to Gordonston School, where he was certainly not the sharpest knife of the drawer. He was a Royal Navy officer for about 20 years. He was a helicopter pilot in the Falklands conflict 40 years ago. He married Sarah Ferguson. They were blessed with two daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, and that marriage ended in scandal when it came to light that his wife was having an adulterous relationship with her financial advisor, and on and on. So he's been a real womanizer. They always used to call him Randy and Andy. There was even a rumor in the 90s that was HIV positive. I don't know if that one's true or not. Now that wouldn't reflect any discredit on him in my book, but some people would think so. Anyway, so he's known for his poor taste in friends, unsavory businessman from countries with a terrible reputation for corruption, and of course his long-standing friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, this New York financier. Epstein, of course, who was convicted in Florida of sexual contact with a minor, I think a 15-year-old. It wasn't full intercourse, but some abusive interaction there. Got a slap on the wrist sentence. But then Epstein, and it was about 2019, was charged with several more crimes and took his own life in a New York prison cell. Although there were question marks over that. Could he really have killed himself? Was he murdered by someone else? Because dead men tell no tales, lest he spill the beans on other VIPs who are involved in some abuse ring on the Lolita Express. But for years and years, Prince Andrew's been labored with these allegations. He just refuses to go away by Virginia Giuffre, or Virginia Roberts, as I think she formerly was. That's her maiden name. That she met him at the age of 17 in Ghislaine Maxwell's house in London, and that she had sexual intercourse with him. But was this under pressure? Is that tantamount to rape or not? Now, the age of consent is 16 in England and Wales, so that would have been lawful so long as it was a consensual encounter. Thank you, Shimon. But that he supposedly had congress with Miss Roberts and others who were underage in, I think, was it the Virgin Islands, U.S. Virgin Islands, Florida, and elsewhere, when some of them were under 18, and that was the age of consent in those jurisdictions. Whether these are true or not, I don't know, but he came up with various spurious excuses or alibis. Well, it couldn't have possibly been me because I didn't perspire for decades because of what I can only describe as an overdose of adrenaline in the Falklands conflict. But he's not proved that he ever had any such medical condition, which means he didn't perspire, which is incredibly rare. And there have been many photos in publishing showing that he did sweat like a swine in a slaughterhouse, and there's a reason why he would be feeling rather clammy when the heat was turned up on him over these very worrying allegations. And there were other things about even being a friend of Jeffrey Epstein, and eventually after Epstein's conviction saying, our friendship must come to an end because it's reflecting discredit on the House of Windsor. And he could have just got a courtier to make a phone call or simply just not returned any messages from Epstein. But no, he flew to New York. I am perhaps too honourable, as Prince Andrew said. And here I have a little sympathy with him, at least sort of saying it in person, right? But it could have taken 5 minutes, but no, he went to stay in Epstein's house for 3 days. And when he's in New York, he'd always stay in Epstein's house, regardless of whether Epstein was there or not, because it was a convenient place to stay, despite being on the same street as the British consulate, which is where members of the British royal family usually stay if they're in New York City. So there are all sorts of problems about that, about his total lack of contrition in that bombshell interview he granted to Emily Maitlis of the BBC in November 2019. So he's paid an undisclosed sum to Victoria Giuffre to settle all this. There are rumours that it's of the order of £12 million and so on. But now Prince Andrew is trying to carve out a new role for him and think that the ideal role for him would be to work helping victims of abuse overcome their traumatic experiences. So how purblind can it be? Now, it's never been proved that he abused anyone. So he might be as innocent as a lamb, but it doesn't look good. And in the court of public opinion, he will never be rehabilitated. Now, his policy about Miss Giuffre and others was to keep stum for about 10 years, sometimes release communiques via his press team, but not to personally answer questions about it. And that wasn't paying off, which is why he changed tack, but seemed to disregard the expert advice of his PR team, one of whom resigned just hours before the interview went out, knowing it would just be cataclysmic, and indeed it was, and not preparing it for properly, not being coached, not rehearsing the right answers to give if they could anticipate Miss Maitlis's questions. So he really is out of his tree that he thinks he can make a comeback. Best thing for him would just never show his face in public again. He didn't go to that ceremony of Thanksgiving at St. Paul's Cathedral for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. I suppose because he had COVID, that might be true. Some people say that's bull. They made up that excuse because they wanted to hide him away. If you just never show your face in public, never say a word, don't be seen, don't be heard, and let the public forget about you. They're not going to completely forget, but certainly don't remind them of your existence. A bit like they used to say about King Edward VIII, the best thing could happen is if he fell off a horse and died. You know, if he had a conveniently timed heart attack. Sorry, I mean, don't want to be too harsh. I don't wish death on him, but if he just disappeared in one way or the other, then that would close the story for the royal family. And apparently Prince Charles' elder brother, the one who's due to become king, really doesn't want Prince Andrew to have any public profile. Then there's Prince William, as in who's the second line of the throne. Prince Charles, his eldest son, Prince William, and Prince William apparently concurs that his uncle Andrew really ought to just vanish. Anyway, so what ingenious plan is there to restore Prince Andrew in the Commonwealth's affections? And that is to send him to North Britain. And obviously the royal family has houses there, Holyrood House, their official residence, Balmoral, their private residence. I don't see how that's going to work, whereas there's more hostility to the monarchy in Scotland than there is in South Britain, so that they would see that as a calculated insult. That was a very muted reaction to this Platinum Jubilee in Caledonia. So I don't see how that's going to work. They'll say, you're just dumping on him, on us, the undesirable. Wow. Anyway, so they really have a tin ear for public opinion. I think that's a good one. Well, yeah, I don't know if he's going to be Balmoral all the time, but he shouldn't have any public role, any public engagements. You could imagine him being booed, jeered, and spat at by hostile crowds. So that is just, I mean, that's a non-starter. What an imbecilic idea that one is. Now, the Archbishop of Canterbury has sprung to the defence of the sixth in line, or what is he? So about ninth in line to the throne now. That's Prince Andrew, saying that we ought to offer absolution, and I agree. People should be forgiving, and remember, he's not been found guilty of any crime whatsoever. I'm a quite forgive and forget sort of person, but I mean, even though I think he's just very foolish, most people think he's rather worse than that. So the trouble is, he would just tarnish the reputation of the royal family and drag them down with his extraordinary unpopularity, because there's a certain word that people are branding him. So anyway, I think he should just disappear. Notably, there was a Knights of the Garter jamboree at Windsor Castle, and he was invested as one of the Knights of the Garter, founded was by King Edward I. Only soit qui mal y pense, shame upon him who thinks badly of it, is their motto, because a lady's garter fell down, and the king stooped down to hand the garter to her. Now, he thought this could be misinterpreted as a lascivious gesture, and to prove that this was an utterly chivalrous thing to do, said, you know what, I'll found an order of chivalry, as in of knighthood, called the Order of the Garter, and you can put OG, Order of the Garter, behind your name. And that's why you think this was a bad thing to do, giving the lady's garter back to it. It wasn't. That's why he said, "On y soit qui mal y pense." Shame on him who thinks badly of it. And there in Windsor Castle, you can see the coats of arms of all the Knights of the Garter ever. There have only been about 1,000. Bear in mind, it's been going on since roughly 1300, and Prince Andrew is one of them. And there can only be something like 25 alive at any one time. Sir Tony Blair was there. But Prince Andrew was not there, and that's a very wise thing. You know, he's been pressurized into resign from various things as patrons of charities. He was even patron of a children's charity in the 1980s, told the signs of abuse to look out for, and things like that. Sort of honorary colonelships of various regiments. The city of York wants his title, Duke of York, to be stripped from them. They don't want their city associated with such a man. So anyway, he is conceited and he's really out of his mind. He's actually deeply, deeply dim. And that's why he honestly believes that royals are like a separate species, because the other members of the royal family, they seem to have their heads screwed on properly and they realize they're not superhuman. They're also human. They're flawed like the rest of us. They're born into positions they don't actually deserve, and they strive not to let the sound down. A lot of people venerate the royal family. Okay, so try and live up to that. But Prince Andrew is the only one who's not like that, and the only one that the staff loathe because he's so scathing towards them. He's abusive, he swears at them, and things like that. So he's got a woeful reputation amongst the police officers, amongst the cleaning staff, amongst all sorts. And a tell-all biography is coming out by Andrew Lowney about Prince Andrew. Thank you so much for watching my channel. So do subscribe. Make sure you book online lessons with me in history, politics, religious studies, French, English as a foreign language, English language, English literature, things like that. And I'm a tour guide in Londinium. Here in Londinium, tourism has reopened. So look me up. Bye.